We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the HaltingWinter podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the HaltingWinter podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Matt Hayden, Township Administrator in Stafford, New Jersey, all the way over to the East Coast. So, Matthew, welcome to the podcast. It is a pleasure to have you on today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Seth. I appreciate it.
Well, you are one of the 250 champions of public service honorees from the National Academy of Public Service. And so we've had a bunch on already before the list even came out, but we want to have more of you on and hear kind of what your story is and what you're up to, obviously in Stafford. I think I've only had one other person on from New Jersey. And so it's a unique place for city management, town administration. And so I look forward to hearing what you're doing up there. But let's wind it back because you have a very unique journey into local government. I think this is going to be one for the ages here on how in the world a chemist ends up in local government. But this is why the cool things about local government, kind of all that they do to bring modern services to residents. So let's do what we do here on the HaltingWinter podcast. Matt, take us back to the beginning. Tell us about where you were born and kind of the childhood that shaped you and set you off on this trajectory.
Yeah, so Seth, I was born in Camden, New Jersey. I grew up in a number of different places, Thoroughfare, Paulsboro, basically Gloucester County area. So to give you kind of an idea, that area is like 15, 20 minutes from Philadelphia. So right on the Delaware River, lived in a number of different places. And essentially, had a hardworking family, grew up in some tough areas. And when I went to school, my intention was to go into pre-med. That's why I started out with the biology major. I started to get some internships at different hospitals and work in that. And it really didn't appeal to me as I got further into it and saw what it was. Not that, any of the blood or the surgeries. It was more the people reactions with the different scenarios that you're put in. So I kind of said, okay, well, maybe I should start to do chemistry and see if I can work in a lab, because I was, science oriented, math oriented. And I obtained my degree in biological sciences for biology and chemistry through Rowan University. Went and worked in the biology field for about 8 years, various jobs, a lot of pharmaceutical jobs. I was fortunate to meet my wife, Melissa, who's, the love of my life, and had the chance, and she lived down the shore. So the Jersey Shore is very popular here, Ocean City area, the Wildwoods, Atlantic City. And she lived right outside of that in a town called Upper Township. And, for a chemist down in that area is more tourist related. And, to find a type of job like that, that's how I ended up with my first local government job. I worked for the Atlantic County Utilities Authority as a lab analyst chemist for a sewer utility. So I worked in the sewer field. I used to, be in aeration basins, reactivated sludge towers, you name it. I worked with if you have dirty jobs, I probably could have been on dirty jobs because there's a lot of, what that I dealt with. Right. So while I was there, they had a program where you could go back to school and receive tuition reimbursement. So I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, well, I'm probably at that point, 28 years old, and I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, I could do this for another, 40 some years, or, maybe I can apply myself to something else. So I went back to Rutgers University. I drove back to Camden where I was born to get it. If you're familiar with that, it's about an hour, 15-minute ride. I did that for 2.5 years and I got my MBA. I had to get all the classes because all my college courses were in biology and chemistry. So I had to take all the business courses. I obtained an MBA in finance and accounting from Rutgers. And then because of what I was doing at ACUA and because they helped pay for it, they said, well, hey, we're going to promote you into a project analyst position and, let you work on some of the projects. And that's really where I started to develop this idea of public service as a career, because as I worked in that, I had the chance to work for mayors and business administrators because the ACUA is a quasi-county governmental entity. So they they ran a sewer plant and they ran a landfill. And with that, all the municipalities in Atlantic County, provided their trash or their sewer to those respective authority functions. So with that, when I started to have those interactions with mayors and BAs, I'm looking at them going, well, these are the guys that are really getting a lot of this stuff done in a community. I think I can do that. So, not too much after I got the MBA, I think I took it maybe a year or so break. I went back and I got my MPA at Villanova University. And that's where I really started to develop that public service motivation. The folks at Villanova, just like it was almost like walking into a family. They literally, brought it out in you like, hey, if you work in these functions, whether it's nonprofit or local government, but in a service associated career, you can really have a positive effect on people. So once I obtained that, I had the fortunate opportunity to go work for the city of Ocean City. I worked there as their manager of capital planning. If you're familiar with Ocean City, they have a long boardwalk that's a big tourist attraction there. We rebuilt the entire boardwalk while I was there. It was right after Hurricane Sandy, so there were a lot of the functions like rebuilding firehouses and roads and infrastructure. And I also developed the talent of writing grants. I go after a lot. I've had the ability to go after a lot of grants there. And I think we obtained over like $12 million in grants for different things, from like restoring historic sites to doing marsh restoration projects, to doing FEMA project worksheets. And I really put a lot of feathers in my cap there, learning how to do affordable housing projects. And I was fortunate enough to become the deputy administrator in Egg Harbor Township. And there, I really got the chance to serve in that administrative function where you're dealing directly with the mayor, and that was a township committee form of government, and interact with the elected officials to bring things to fruition with different programs. And same thing, while I was there, writing grants, going after different programs that are offered here in the state of New Jersey. And, that was a privilege to serve there. And, to kind of fast forward to where I am now, I just hit the 7-year mark a couple days ago. It was April 1st. So I don't know whether it was a joke or not for April Fool's Day, but my start date here was April 1st of 2019. I've been here 7 years. And, I think that, it's an honor to be recognized as a part of that 250, but we've really done a lot in the leadership role. And that all relates back to the governing bodies I've served here. The staff we have here is awesome, but really serving in that, being that visionary for what we can do if we properly plan, if we include, the public, the governing body, the staff in decisions that we make. And that's how we've been really able to push a number of things here forward. Um, there's a number of things that I could go on that we've done here in Stafford, um, to highlight like what you can do environmentally. So what I've tried to do is not only, take the things that I learned as a chemist and as a biologist and apply them to what things we've done here. As far as we're the only municipality in the last 25 years that's cleaned up a major water body. It's over 186 acres of Manahawkin Bay. That's from having a plan to update our water and sewer infrastructure, particularly the sewer infrastructure. But then I've tied that into getting funding from different organizations that are here that offer grants and financing options. Right here in Stafford, we've between grants, incentives, and rebates, we've gotten over $55 million in funding to be able to fund a lot of the projects that have been done. We have parks that we've made all inclusive. So individuals with disabilities, it can include, I mean, the list goes on, Seth, because I think if as you get into this, you pick up many hats. Right now, I'm the certified floodplain manager for the township. I'm the Township Administrator, the Director of Water and Sewer, the CRS community coordinator for the community rating system, one of the co-emergency managers, the deputy clerk right now. At times I've been the department head for animal control. This is the type of position that you can't be willing to say no. You just have to know that, like, hey, when a problem comes, when one of those wicked problems come, you're the person that goes and figures it out. And that to me is the awesome part about doing this, right? That's the public service motivation, is when you get the problem, you're the person that has to come up with the plan to fix it. And, you have the access to have your staff work on things and get the input from the public. But ultimately, it's on you to figure out, hey, how are we solving this? And to me, that's the cool part about what I do.
I love it. And I love that you highlight that. That's really the reality of local gov. And what separates local gov from all other forms of government is these are real problems with real people that don't just have policy and, people talking in rooms and committees. It's like you have something to solve, or else that person, right, or those things aren't getting done or impacted. And so you see the work right away of your ideas, of your work.
I have a perfect example right now. We have when I started here, Stafford Township is a very large municipality area-wise. So we have parts of the township that are in what's called the Pinelands area. It's basically forested area. We have sections that are suburban communities. We have sections that are affordable housing. We have 2 islands in the township that are on the bay side of the township. We have the largest lagoon front community in New Jersey. And then we have another small site that's called Mud City, that is, what it sounds like, right? It's in an area that's flood prone, and they're along the marsh. So each one and then we have a large commercial district. So we have areas with big box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's and Target and Costco and Walmart. So each one of those areas brings with it different sets of rules. It brings with it different sets of opinions of what should be done, and tying all those things into one another. It definitely leads to like some conflicting opinions of what should or should not happen. So getting that insight from the people, and then utilizing the great staff that I have, that's how we've been able to, do a lot of the good things that we do.
I love it. I love it. Okay, let's back up because there's a couple things I want to do. Obviously, I want to dive into because you also wear that hat of water and sewer, and it's National Water Week here. I think a month from this week in May, we're gonna have a couple Water World guests on, and we can't. You're already here, so we got to talk about, because I think it's one of the things. It's why I love this podcast and in spreading the spotlight on local gov, because residents, business owners, all the people who live and function and work in our cities, we just turn on the water and expect it to flow. We flush our toilets and expect it to go away. We have no idea of the infrastructure, of the chemistry of what's going on to treat the water and all these things. So I definitely want to dive into that. But let's go back to first. I always ask in childhood, even though you said you kind of went to school to kind of become a doctor and then you end up, a chemist. Did you have any awareness of local government on your radar growing up at all?
I had a grandmother that had a store in Paulsboro, New Jersey, one of the places I grew up in, and she would always go to the council meetings all the time there, and occasionally she would bring me with her to that. And kind of as a kid, you're just sitting there going, "Okay, when's this meeting over?" But then, like transitioning into the job, it's like, "Oh, this is why she was active in this. She was a business owner in the community. She wanted to know what was going on." And, she also wanted to be able to provide that input. Whether she was heard or not at the time, I remember a lot of times she would leave angry that they did, whatever they did at the time may have affected her business. You know, Looking back on that and sitting in the position, I think it kind of helps to tie it, having different experiences. That's the one thing I'll say is like from growing up in those areas, I have a different experience than most because when you asked me to work on an affordable housing project, well, it's kind of different if you've lived in it and then have to administer it, right? So being able to see both sides of like how we make this work. We were just here recently in the township, not to divert from the water and sewer, but we were working with the state. Our affordable housing obligation was initially related to the 420. Well, when we sat down, we're like, okay, we're in a municipality that, yeah, it has a lot of area, but a lot of the area is preserved. It's either preserved because it's that forested pinelands area, or it's preserved because it's marsh and it's federal wildlife preserve. Well, how do you put affordable housing in an area that's a severe flood hazard area or an area that's restricted that you can't develop? So we were able to work with our state and with our fair share of housing authority here in the state to be able to get that number down to 17, which is a realistic number of what we can do and also provide affordable housing. Because the township itself here, it's a substantially built out. It's, to try to put 420 homes, other than going up, it's not, becomes difficult. And we're not in a acidified area that would make sense for what the township is zoned for. Similar to the water and sewer, I'm big on plans. I think I mentioned, Seth, I have a plan for everything. We have a plan for resiliency, which when I started here, we didn't have. We have a plan for our parks. We have a plan for our roads. We also have plans for all our water and sewer infrastructure. So I take those plans out 10 years. Prior to me, they were looked at in a 5-year time frame. To me, it's the responsible thing to do, right? And eventually when it's time for me to either be replaced or move on, somebody's going to come in and they're going to be a lot better positioned than when I started back in 2019. Essentially, at that point, there was a lot of there wasn't any communication essentially going on within the building. And to me, we don't make these things happen without having good relationships, right? That's good relationships with our own staff, with our own governing body, with the people that are outside of town hall, right? That's the federal government agencies, that's the state agencies. Building that network is crucial to be able to get these things done. But it also, when you build those relationships with those folks, they see what you're trying to do is environmentally sound, like the bay cleanup. When I walked in here day one, I sat down with our superintendent of water and sewer, and he came to me and he said, "Matt, the sewer system's at the point where it's ready to fail. We need to do something about it." So the first thing we did was we came up with a plan to replace the sewer in the worst sections that needed to be first. And year by year, as a part of the budget process, we replaced the worst section. Then the next year, we replaced the next worst section. Well, with my science background, I knew that they tested the water out in the bays from doing the science work that I did. So I reached out to the state and I said, "Hey, can you share that science data, the water quality data from the bay?" And when they shared that with me, I'm looking at it, I'm going, "Well, guys, look at your own data. It shows that we've cleaned the bay up." Because if you looked at 2017, 2018 data, there was fecal matter in the water. If you look up the north of the state to the south of where we're at, that's what it shows for those municipalities, right? I took that data then back to the state, and they have a financing program here. They actually help now fund the sewer phases that we have, because this area I mentioned It's the largest lagoon front community in the state. Well, there's 12. When we started, there was 9 phases. Now there's 12 phases because the sewer was built back in the 1950s. Well, just like us, it gets old. It gets older. It needs to be replaced. So, and typically those are the type of things that most people like. It's out of sight, out of mind, right? The pipes are in the ground. If it's not, if the sewer's not spilling onto the streets or into the waterways, you know, a lot of opinion is well, who cares? But if you don't do that and then you have an emergency, well, what happens? That the sewer could go into the bay. That could affect the environment, the marsh. Well, that's why the people that live in that section of the town, that's why they live there, right? They enjoy those things. So if you don't take care, it's just like a house, right? If I let the roof go and then all of a sudden it's raining inside my house, whose fault is that, right? So
Exactly.
we have a plan for all our water infrastructure. We have 7 water towers right now. We just replaced a water line last year where we're able to get rid of one of our water towers. Well, that's a savings for the community for the next 50 to 75 years because a water tower of the size we had to replace was about $3.5 million. Well, the water line cost us $1 million and it's expected to last the same length of time as that water tower. Well, that water tower every 10 years, because the environment we have to be in has to be rehabbed. Well, that's $1 million, $1.5 million every 10 years. Well, if it lasted 50 years, it's $1.5 million today. What do you think it would be 10 years from now, right? It's going to be more. So, even if it was $2 million over that amount of time, that's $10 million. Well, that same pipe, it's in the ground, right? So it's not, unless somebody hits it, which would be an insurance claim, there's no other, the maintenance is making sure the water gets to the people. It's in the ground now. So we're going to be able to go from 7 towers to 6 towers. That's a substantial savings to the residents because they're not going to have to pay for that water tower. So that's the type of thing that I usually try to bring with me is like, I don't let all the science things that I learned years ago go to waste. I put them to use. We do that. The township didn't have a resiliency plan here because we're in an area that when Superstorm Sandy hit the coast of New Jersey, a number of the towns, the municipalities here flooded, Stafford included. We're working right now. We have a $10 million grant. We're working with the state of New Jersey through the DEP. They've been awesome partners. We obtained 2 $5 million grants to then work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, a federal entity, to replace dredge spoils from the lagoon system that's been silted in to restore the marsh. So what's that do? It provides the environment that the people, that Forsyth wants to see, right? They're in the business of keeping the Forsyth Refuge through their property, restored. What's that do? That provides the environment for the herons and the swans and all the wildlife, the terrapins, the fish that are in that area to be able to go and, reclaim area that's been washed away over time. It also provides a resiliency measure because it's built as a sill. So God forbid there were another Superstorm Sandy. Well, the wave action that the homes in this area, Beach Haven West, would see is now going to be dissipated because of the way we're building this berm. That wouldn't have been done if we didn't start a resiliency plan back in 2019 and, have good partners like U.S. Fish and Wildlife and NJDEP to be able to have as partners. That's why I always preach to the folks that are coming up, you need to build that network of organizations that you can work with because they're going to be the folks that help you move your municipality forward to make it a better community for the people that you're serving.
April is National County Government Month. It's a time to recognize the amazing work counties do to keep our communities running. From public safety and courts to health services, infrastructure, and everything in between, counties carry an enormous responsibility, and they do it in ways most people never see. And right now, one of the biggest conversations happening across county and local government is how artificial intelligence can help support that work. You know who's helping lead that conversation in local government? That's right, it's Tyler Technologies. Tyler's been helping counties and local governments apply AI in some significant ways, streamlining routine tasks, improving access to information, and helping staff spend more time focused on serving their communities. To help leaders understand what's possible, Tyler has released a brand new ebook. It's called AI for Impact: Proven Results for Government. It highlights inspiring examples of organizations already using AI to strengthen operations, to improve insights, and to make government services easier for residents to navigate. The best part, that ebook is free. You can download it today at tylertech.com/winter. Again, that's tylertech.com/winter. Now, back to the conversation. Yeah. Oh, you said so many good things. And the two things that really that stand out that I want to hit on again is A, you didn't just go, oh, I'm not a chemist anymore. Now I just got to learn a new, administration skill. And you're using all of the experience. I think that's the cool thing about local gov is it's so expansive. And there's so many areas that, yes, you might think, well, my undergrad's in something that's kind of irrelevant now. No, it's probably relevant. There's a way for it to be relevant in local gov for sure. And then the second thing that you've just said that I think multiple leaders have said on this to an extent is the planning. You have to live in the present because there's so many challenges in the present day that you are kind of like you said, like people have problems, they have issues, you got to respond. And that's the impactful work. But you also have to plan, or else what happens is you just increase the problems, right? Because things aren't getting replaced. And like you said, I think that's such a brilliant analogy is like, it's the things in your house. It's like the roof, like, yeah, we should, but I want a new couch, or I want something that I can actually feel. And, we all want the new park or whatever it is, but the pipes underground are the things that are making the water in the sewer actually flow. And it's expensive, isn't it? And so that's where, again, just to say, this is why city managers, town administrators are needed. You need the professionals to go get those grants, to figure out the planning. Like you say, I love that you said you've got a plan for 10 years, because in that plan, you want to outlive your tenure there. And that's going to make the next person come in. And I think that's the beauty of, I remember Danielle Doolin from Kansas, she's a city manager in Manhattan, Kansas now. She said, one of the things that was hard for her was when she was in the city before where she is now. She said, she kind of came in the middle of some big projects. And that was one of the things that was hard is she had to pass that off and not finish it when she moved to Manhattan. And that's kind of the reality of the role. There's going to be work. It doesn't matter if you stay in a city for 30 years. You're never going to complete, like you said, that infrastructure, the pipes you're placing were like 1940s, 50s. So it is, your city's going to outlive you. You've got to have a plan to continue to make sure that the infrastructure, both below ground and above ground, continues to move forward. And so I love that you highlighted that. Take us back to, again, you spend out of Rowan University, you spend a handful of years being a chemist in the public sector, and then you go to Atlantic County Utilities Authority, still using your chemist skills there. What was it like then? Take us back to what was it like to work for local gov? Was there any stark differences between public sector and private sector?
I would say the biggest one, just to go to your point, that's kind of like the biggest transition, I think, for anybody that comes from another field, is you have to be able to take so like as a chemist, every day when I left for the day, I knew all my SOPs, my assignments, any analytics that I did, it was done. And then I could go on and live with the day. To your point and that goes back to trying to create a succession plan for all your departments, including your own, for where that community is going to go, right? Because one day we know we're not going to be in those chairs one way or another, right? The ability to do, that's the biggest change that I see between the private sector and the public sector. Here, when I went to work in project management or department ed or in my role now, when I have to realize that I could work 24/7, 365 days a year, and there's things that it doesn't matter what point in time, it's not going to be done. It's not going to be done because we need a permit for something. It's not going to be done because I need to find funding for it. It's not going to be done for various reasons. And you have to kind of get to the point in your head where you go, okay, I can't just sit here and materialize over it while I'm waiting for those things. It's like you get it to that point, you go, okay, it's in the queue, and you have to be able to be a good project manager to go, okay, set that to the side. We're going to work on this now. We're going to get that to that point. We're going to go on to the next thing. And the cool thing about it is there's never any one thing that you don't have to do, right? There's always something that I can go, okay, there's the next thing to do. And I think that's the important part of going from the lower level jobs to the higher level jobs. And you pointed it out already, Seth. There's the way I teach so I teach for Villanova in their MPA program, and they do an awesome job. To do that's a privilege, and to, ignite the change that those students have for public service is awesome. But the one thing that I try to point out to the students is there's part of you that has to be manager. And to me, manager means it's the stuff we're getting done day to day, right? If there's a pothole on Main Street, we're making sure the pothole gets filled, or, and Public Works gets out there to do what they need to do. But you also have to be that leader that looks to that vision for that 10 years. And you have to be able to balance that, right? Like part of the job is getting the lights turn on in town hall and the functions get done. But being that leader is something that you have to bring to the table, because you're getting that vision from the governing body you serve. You're getting that vision from the public that you serve. You're also getting that vision from the staff, because the staff are the ones that are going to be able to say, hey, the construction officials telling you, hey, we can't do that because of the UCC code. And the rec director saying, hey, we need more park space because, we got too many, the development of the town is so big. We don't have enough fields. All of those things you have to go between manager and leadership. And to me, that was the biggest change between the private sector and the public sector. The other thing I will add to is the ability. I think it's the public sector in that aspect, having that ability to have to look out further, but also the fact that people are willing to share, right? When I worked at Wyeth doesn't go to Merck and say, hey, let's share our secrets, right? We're going to, share our pharmaceutical drugs. No, they're trying to make, right? They're private business. They're trying to make money. In the public sector, if I see something that's going on in a different state or a different municipality and I reach out, the likelihood that somebody's going to respond back to me is very high, right? Because at the end of the day, most of us that are in public service, if our communities thrive and the next door community thrives, or the next community in another state thrives, that's better for all of us, right? So to me, that's where this is really a profession. It's not a job. You're providing that service to the public, and that's like the motivation inside you to say like, hey, I'm willing to share that information, because if we've done something you haven't done yet, why have you put all the work that I had to put in to get to that point? And to your point of like, eventually you're going to leave it to somebody shouldn't have to drive through the stuff that I drove through, right? Let them take advantage, because their goal should be to drive wherever I got it to at that point, even further into the future. And that's the cool part, and why it's nice to work with groups of people, even though they're not your own entity, that want to see that happen.
Well, we're weaving and winding through your story, but I don't want to pass this up, because you've set up the ball perfectly for a home run hit. Because you teach at Villanova, interacting with the MPA students, and because you live this life, and I think this is what it's a unique reality in public sector work. And I identify with this as a pastor. I was a pastor for 10 years. And so I just know that heart of service, of wanting to, right? The work that you do impacts people's lives on a daily basis. And it often comes with their challenges, with the hardships, when problems arise, right? The fire isn't coming out to, play patty cake. They're coming out to respond to emergencies. And it's same with all these things. And so how you said it, there's so much work. You could work 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, and you'd never really even scratch the surface of all that you could do to make a place thrive and flourish. How do you, both for yourself, for your team, and for students that you're encouraging, training, developing, how do you live in the reality of that? I have a keynote called Work-Life Balance is BS. There's no such thing as balance. There's just intention. I would think that this job can overwhelm you because you want to be of service, and you could feel the keynote I give. It talks about the shame then of servant leadership, where I love servant leadership, right? We want to pour out, we want to be servant leaders, but goodness gracious, you can start to feel guilty then to take any time for yourself, because it's like, well, I can give, it's like at the end of Schindler's List. If you remember that movie, he's racked with guilt. I could have sold something else. I could have freed one more. And it's like, I think in public service, you guys are the best of the best. And it can lead to a lot of burnout. It can lead to a lot of it can almost lead to overwhelm. And then you don't care anymore because you're so callous to the pain point of I can't be engaged because I'll be overwhelmed. Have you experienced that at all? What does that look like as you're trying to help students who are passionate, but you go, I don't want you to burn out in the process of the need?
Yeah, I think, and I think the answer to that is probably individual to everybody, to be quite honest, Seth. I think that each person comes to it in their own way. I've always just found that there's always that one more thing. It's like, okay, hey, here we help the Ocean County government get a grant to be able to do a library, to build a library. I think it's the first new library built in Ocean County in over several years, right? To me, it's the fun. To me, it's just fun. So I tried through that program. The MPA program is not just meant to be for local government folks. It could be for nonprofits. You really have to find that person that has that public service motivation for local government. Because to me, it's like, I understand what you're saying, because, at the end of any career, right? We see people go into retirements, and it's just like, you get senioritis, like you're back in high school, right? It's time to go. I think it's just when you find what you want to do in your career, it was like a light bulb went off for me. So when I got that chance to work with those BAs a long time ago, it was just like, I'm going to love that, this is what I love how to do. So it's just like the complexity of solving those problems. I think when I talk to the students, you have to be able to balance that, right? I think all of us get to a point where, if we were to step up into a higher level job, whether that's whether it's a municipality that's a lot more people, or a county manager job, or we go work for the White House. Eventually, we all get to the job, right, that we probably it's over our skill level. I think you just have to know, some people, maybe a department level job is the right, department head job is the right position, or community developer. You have to find for each individual person what allows you to do what you're talking about. There's the attempt at it, right? I always try to have balance too, but I'm always putting in, the 60 to 70 hours you talk about working as administrator. That's just because you need that time to spend with the community. It's the extra 5 minutes that you give to somebody that might make the light bulb go off in your head that says, this is how we're going to make this work. And spending that time, even though it may not be personally, maybe I want to go shoot a couple baskets at night, but that time is more valuable making that community better. Because the baskets might go in, and that's good exercise, but I just affected thousands and thousands of people by being able to put that resiliency measure in. Maybe that's a family that doesn't get flooded out. We've been working with the state through the DCA to help people with homelessness over the past year. They were able to fund a nonprofit to help us with homeless individuals, because there's a municipality north of us that shut down their homeless shelter. Well, that's meant all the surrounding municipalities have seen an uptick in homeless individuals in their community. We've taken the approach of, we're going to help those people. The state is helping us do it. I was able to get funding to be able to, the township residents aren't paying for it, the state's paying for it. And this entity has helped when we find those individuals, whether it's through a police officer, or a resident comes to me, or a resident goes to our zoning and says, hey, I have a homeless person that lives out here. We're now helping those people. To me, going back to your point of service, we just helped this past year with that program, 16 families get either temporary housing or into a better place than living outside. Here in the state, we have probably had the worst winter we've had in probably the last 15 years, Seth. I can't imagine standing outside. We've had snowstorms that have been like 25 inches, which we haven't seen in a very long time. Could you imagine sleeping out in the snow and 25 inches? Helping those people is, part of this is you're giving your life for a better purpose for the community that you serve. To me, that's valuable, right? That's something that it's not meant to be like, oh, toot my own horn. That's the care within is like, we're stewards of where this country, this world goes. And when you put that extra effort in, to me, that's just like your work as a pastor. How many people did you affect in that role? It's the same thing here. You're just affecting it in a different way.
Yeah, I love that. Again, it's such a mission-driven work career, but like you said, I think you said it really poignant. It is an individual. You got to figure out what's in your tank. You got to figure out what recharges you. You got to figure out the other elements of life, and there are seasons of life too. You have young kids, you have older kids. You're empty nesters, and so just being aware of that. But yeah, the work doesn't shut off, and yet that's why we want passionate people who are actually in it to serve. Take us back because I want to tap into your specific unique, this chemist, because I think that's something that, again, we mentioned, residents just have no idea what goes into the modern services that we experience and that we have from our local governments. Tell us about something that maybe we wouldn't know. Why in the world is a chemist and a lab analyst needed for utilities? What does that work look like? Maybe we can encourage someone who goes, there's no way, a local government, that sounds like pencil, paper, and pushing and administration. Right. How in the world is a chemist used in local government?
Yeah, well, when I worked at the ACUA, we would test potable and non-potable water. So, from a standpoint of potable water, from a water system standpoint, the water needs to be tested at certain locations before it goes out to the public. And then there's regulations, right? There's regulations that the EPA sets. There's regulations that your state sets of what the quality of the water is that goes out into the community. So part of that chemist function is going out and taking those samples and making sure that it's in compliance. And sometimes that means that adjustments need to be made, right? Maybe there's more chlorine that needs to go in at a well, or maybe filters need to be replaced at a certain location. That helps make sure that the water quality is getting out in the way that it's meant to go out to the public. From a sewer end, when I worked at the utility authority, they were measuring. So microorganisms are used to eat the biosolids when they go into the sewer plant, right? The idea is to minimize the amount of waste that you either have to incinerate or landfill or grow, and to, fertilizers. Each plant is different. So at the plant I worked at, they incinerated it. So as a chemist, we would go into the aerators and take samples of the sewer, because you would want to measure the growth of the microorganisms, because those microorganisms would help eat the biosolids. The more they ate, the more we didn't have to incinerate. So you would constantly go out and take those measurements. When I worked at the landfill, we would test. So like trash goes into a landfill. Well, what do you think happens to the water that goes through a landfill? It goes into leachate tanks, and then it has to be disposed of in a certain way. I was a project analyst. We worked on a landfill gas project to be able to utilize the methane from the active landfill to provide energy to the site. But at the same time, as a chemist, I would test the leachate to see what was in those tanks. Well, to give you an example, I applied that here. When I took over here in 2019, the township had a redevelopers agreement with the developer that developed on land here in the township. And they, as a part of the redevelopment, they closed the landfill. Well, the agreement was after 10 years, they turned the closed landfill over to the town. Well, it just so happened that 10 years was up like a week after I started on that April 1st, 2019 date. And they said, okay, well, now you're running the landfill. So luckily I've, worked at a landfill and analyzed that data. The data would come to me. We just this past year were able to get go from, so a closed landfill doesn't have the methane that's generated from the landfill as an active one would have. The sulfurs are not there, so the smells typically start to die down, because those odors will go out into the air And usually you get the public complaining, hey, that landfill stinks, right? I was able to take the data and over a period of time show the state that we didn't need a major permit, which is what you need to run a landfill. We could go down to a minor permit because a lot of the things that that the company we were paying to take these tests, I didn't test those right in my suit. We sent that out to a company. Well, when the data came back, I'm looking at it, I'm going, well, why are we spending the money on a major permit when we don't have any of these things even detectable anymore? And we've done it over a course of time that we can prove to the state that it's not valid, not needed anymore. We were able to go from a major to a minor permit. So essentially what that means is a lot less tests that we have to take because we've demonstrated that the property has been cleaned up. That saves the township about $50,000 a year. And if I wasn't a chemist, I wouldn't even have known to look at that, right? Or worked at a landfill and knew like, hey, these are emissions that we have to test for and stormwater wells that we have to take samples from. I knew to ask, and I applied that and said, well, hey, why are we spending this money on something we show isn't even being detected? It's not worth spending the money on. And I think, my observation from doing this, you see a lot of people transition into these careers, from different aspects of life, because they saw part of local government and said, hey, I can be that person that helps affect this change. And I think that's the cool part is you get different people from different backgrounds. It's like anything else. The more diversity, the more opinions. I always look to have department heads and staff that have different worldview, different aspects that they look at things, because I'll never claim to know everything. I take the input of others and make sure I apply it. And to me, that means having different people in those roles because they're going to provide insight that I may not have, and they have a knowledge base that I don't have. So you also have to be able to take a step back and know you don't know everything and trust the individuals that have that information to be able to make ethical and, ethical and professional decisions that you can bring back to your governing body to implement them.
Let me ask you something. If culture really matters in your organization, why isn't it being built with intention? Not discussed, not delegated, actually built and then sustained with just as much intention. Here's the hard reality. Culture isn't what your organization believes. It's what your leaders tolerate, reward, and repeat. In most cities and counties, they say culture matters while leaving it completely to chance. That's why this April, we are doing something different. Inside the Municipal Leadership Development Circle, you know it as the MLDC, we're kicking off a 3-month deep dive into organizational culture. Weekly content, conversations with leaders across North America, and live training sessions from the Leadership and Culture program. We're going to work through the ideas and insights from books like Turn the Ship Around, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and Unreasonable Hospitality. But more importantly, we're going to translate those insights into how you actually lead your team in the unique context of local government. For the first time, we're opening this up in a big way. We're offering 500 memberships to the MLDC for just $500. That gives you full access to the MLDC, the weekly content, and the vibrant community of leaders from across North America. But here's where it's really over the top. We're giving 3 months of insider access to the Leadership and Culture program. That's a $2,500 value. We're doing this because transforming City Hall from the inside out isn't just optional, it is necessary, and it's necessary right now. But here's the catch. We kick off our first live training session on the topic of culture on Thursday, April 16th. And so once the 500 spots are gone, they're gone. So if you're ready to stop talking about culture and to actually start building it, I want you to head over to HaltingWinter.com/MLDC. That's HaltingWinter.com/MLDC, or simply just use the link in the show notes. Secure your spot today. Now, back to the conversation. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I love again in the story, you're at Atlantic County Utilities Authority, you're working as a chemist, lab analyst. You go, oh man, I want to level up. You go back to Rutgers, you get your MBA, and then you start working as a project analyst, and that opens up your eyes, you said, to kind of the broader scope of opportunities. You go back then to get your NPA, and just to say there too, I think that's there are all kinds of there's scholastic education, there's experience education, but in this role specifically, like there is it is one of the worlds where there is a lot of training. Like there's a lot of accreditations. There's a lot of, just again, you said it's so expansive, all the knowledge areas, and you can't hold it all. It's why you got to build great teams. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But for you, I just love that you were like, you could have been really frustrated, but like, gosh, I just spent all this time on this MBA. Now I got to go do it again for an MPA. And yet you did it. And then that leads you to the city of Ocean City. Talk about, and then you go into capital planning. You mentioned that big boardwalk project. And I want to maybe touch on that, because you said that it was Hurricane Sandy that came in, but it was also infrastructure that needed to be redone. And what an opportunity to go, oh, well, how can we do it better, right? How we just had a storm. We can't just build it the same. We got, it's kind of like you think about what was the big Hurricane Katrina. They had to rebuild Louisiana, that area totally differently. If they just rebuilt the same, they're just waiting for the next thing to happen. So what was that experience like working now from the county to the city and working on a project of that kind of magnitude?
Yeah, I mean, so I was at that point. I had I worked for the county for about 3.5 years as a chemist, and then I worked for them about 5 years as the project analyst. So I'd worked on big projects before, but they were mainly sewer projects and water projects and landfill projects. Worked on a lot of renewable energy projects. So like the scale of a city working on a road really didn't do that before, right? I had my PMP too, so I have my PMP certificate to run projects. Essentially, you apply that same knowledge base to running to run boardwalk jobs. It was the same thing there. They had great staff. They had great engineers and project managers on staff that would report to me through the CFO. And essentially with with Ocean City, it just gave me a new breath of, okay, there's other stuff to work on other than landfills and sewer work, right? So one of the examples I could give there is we tried to maximize, because all of the city was in a severe flood hazard area, working for federal governments. So we had federal government grants. They had a program at the time called Flood Mitigation Assistance. And essentially what it did was, if the municipality was willing to put the time in, they could help elevate structures, even private structures, residences, in flood-prone areas, because FEMA at the time was giving money to help get people out of the floodplain, because if the house didn't flood, they wouldn't. And going back to Katrina, if the house didn't flood, that was a house they didn't have to, pay out an insurance claim to. So they would pay those residents that had multiple claims the money to raise their house to get them out of harm's way. And we essentially applied the same thing to the capital plans when we would do a firehouse, or any of the projects that we did. Any opportunity we got to get those properties out of the floodplain, that's what we would do. And essentially it was just general project management 101. You create a spec with your engineers and with the budget that you have. You go out, you bid that project. We have purchasing laws that are specific to New Jersey. Make sure you're in compliance with those. Award the bid, and then pre-con meetings with the contractors, and then any resiliency measures. You would do that at the front end of the spec, so that when you went to bid it, you could implement those things. So each one of those projects, essentially, you follow that same project manager format, and then manage the project with billing. And you want to try to minimize your change orders. But then also realize that some change orders, if they're needed, they have to be substantiated, and then bringing that to the governing body to make sure they're on board, and then moving that forward through the municipal meetings that you have. That was a change from that role, because at the county they had a little more leeway, right? You didn't have to. You reported to a board of directors who met once a month, who were private citizens within a county. Essentially, if it needed to get done and it would pertain to sewer or trash, you got it done, because it was a function of, we need to make sure the trash gets here or the sewer gets to where it's going. With this, a little bit different, because you're working within the budget. and then the input that you got from the community, which some people, will say, hey, I don't want my taxes raised, but that could mean like, hey, well, we need to then drop services or drop staff because we can't, if you don't want to see it, well, things go up, infrastructure fails and you need to replace it. So you have to be able to manage that budget.
So true. Well, tell us about what from Ocean City you end up in Egg Harbor. You're going to become the deputy town administrator. When was the bug for more administration? And tell us, I'm sure people hear deputy township administrator, we probably have no idea. That just means basically I'm sure you wear multiple hats. You kind of wear whatever hat needs to be worn that day. Exactly. Tell us about what was the draw to kind of move into that kind of a role, and tell us about kind of all the hats that you wore there in Egg Harbor.
I mean, that was I would consider probably one of the biggest steps, because up to that point, I was under, a bargaining unit, whether it was a CWA or, and then there's this idea that there's this level of protection, right, through those bargaining units. And it was kind of like not being in the role and not knowing like, hey, what that experience is going to be, because you have your own employment contract and it's at will, and what's that going to be? That from going where I was at, and you got to remember, I'm still younger when I did that. Like having a family and making sure they're taken care of. That's a big jump for somebody, right? To think like, hey, I'm going to be working without a net. I would say like the reason why I took that position was not only I served under a township administrator, had been there for almost 30 years. So just to learn from that experience and get learn under that knowledge, but also the ability to be able to go out and administer these projects at that level and have that interaction. Because I knew, to answer the first part of that question, I knew I wanted to be an administrator going back to when I was in that project analyst. Because once I saw what they were doing, I was like, that's where I'm going. It was kind of one of those things where, I don't know anybody. I'm a complete professional. The only way I'm going to get there is by working my tail off and doing as much as I possibly can to show my worth. And I think that made that transition easier, because, and I always, preach this to the students when I'm teaching the classes at Villanova. It's an at-will position. So if the governing body comes in and because of whatever reason they want to get rid of you, they can do that. That's their right. But it's in the professionalism and it's in the ethics that you do, and it's in those management and leadership functions that you get better with over time through experience and creating those networks and all those things we already talked about, that you get better over time. And people come to you because they know you're the person that can figure it out, that can get it done. And whether that governing body were to get rid of you or not, you can go into multiple sectors, right? That's the good thing about being political. I've seen, people in New Jersey that they get it through a political way. Well, what happens when the party changes, right? It probably doesn't make for a good, transition to stay in that position. Whereas as you work in a professional, and Villanova taught me this, is, people will come to you because you're the one that figures it out, right? So I don't really, after a while I started to learn, and I think I learned that in EHT, is if you can demonstrate that value, it doesn't matter whatever happens. You're going to find, you're going to go into the next thing because people are going to know the value that you bring to the table and what you do. You build that over time. I think in EHT, I learned the ability to work more directly with the elected officials, but also be able to implement that policy at a higher level than I could as at that department level manager capital planning role. But I knew from the time that I got that MPA, Seth, I was, you can ask my wife, I would talk about it all the time. I'm like, I'm getting this because I wanted to be able to not only show what I could do, but show like my goal when I took this job is I'm going to make Stafford Township the best municipality, the best run municipality in Stafford Township, because I want to put all the municipalities to know I'm creating the playbook. I'll give it to you. You go run it, right? You can run it and do the same things that we're doing. All I needed was the opportunity. And that's what they gave me in Stafford Township to do. And we've been, I think we've been very successful. I think there's still more things to the point of it's never done. I think there's a lot more things to do. That's why it's still exciting. But that was my goal, is like, there's so many things that if the right person is able to put them together, I can do that. And then it's not only about, like my job is to make Stafford Township the best, but the goal from a public administration is, let's make all the municipalities in the state the best. And then why stop at the state? Let's look at the United States. This is what we can do. That's why I like teaching as well, because it's not about, I'm not afraid of teaching anybody that's either served as an assistant or deputy to me, because if they go off, and I've had a few of them go off and become administrators and deputies at other municipalities, that just means my network got bigger, and all the things that hopefully I instilled in them leave with them the same things for the communities that they serve. And I'm very proud that, I think a number of them have done that. And I couldn't be prouder of them. And that's a feather in my cap, I think, because, if I didn't show them how to do these things, they wouldn't know as much as they know from in that time we served together.
Totally. I want to end with leadership development and what you're doing at Villanova and within even the Township of Stafford. But I want to go back to when I love it. You're, again, public sector chemist, then you're a chemist inside local gov, then, kind of department manager of capital planning to Ocean City, then deputy town administrator. 2019, you become the actual township administrator. And I want you to go back to that moment and try to remember, what was it like to now be, because I think it's such a unique role to be the one who's kind of, I call it, you're on the municipal tightrope, and you're kind of the lightning rod of what I call chaos, because you are the person. You're not the deputy that's kind of protected by the real administrator. Now you are the lightning rod from the council, from the residents, from all those department heads that make up your staff. You've got kind of the three-headed snake there. That's exciting, but it can also be a lot of work to manage all those groups and all, because again, it's not like your council all thinks the same. So you got different, thoughts there. You got different residents and pockets. You got different philosophies on your staff. Do you remember what was back to 2019? What was exciting about it, being in that role for the first time, and what was the biggest challenge that maybe you didn't think that kind of shocked you a little bit to go, oh, this is different now in this role?
I think that it's interesting, Seth, because the person that was in my role before me, they did a lot of things that we're not talking about, right? It was unprofessional and unethical and all those things. To me, I just walked into it and I'm like, there is so much work to be done here. And it was almost like it's at such a low level. I can essentially do anything and it's going to be better, right? So from that aspect, I'm like, this is going to be good. But that's not my mentality. My mentality was, the mayor governing body trusted me to do this. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do as much as I can. We've gone through, since I started, this is a strong mayor form of government. We have one mayor and 6 council members. The first mayor, he went on to become an assemblyman because we've done so many good things. He was recognized for all the things that he did as mayor, and was selected to run for assembly, and he got that. So now we have a new mayor. All of the elected officials have been great to work with. Like you said, everybody has their different opinions. Part of your role is, managing on that and giving them professional and ethical recommendations so they can have their opinions, but you're relaying to them what the laws are so that they can make a reasonable decision, even though they may not, be completely in line with that. But they're great, they're a great group of people. But that transition, I think we've had 2 mayors, 13 council members, and the transition of just different people, that was new to me. But going back to the beginning, with seeing how it was run, there were so many things that I had to figure out and issues that were created that needed to be solved. It was just like, I just put my head down and just said, I'm going to solve them one by one. And it was a lot of nights here till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. For like the first 4 years, I was here till 10, 11 o'clock at night because there were some problems that were like, I can't allow this to be like for various reasons. But to clean that up, the other thing that I really appreciated was the staff, but working under that environment, you can imagine like who the place really ran was because they had good people, right? The people wanted to make sure they had good functions. I wanted to highlight the people because of how good they are and holding the ability to do that. But also like I wanted to and sometimes they roll their eyes at me now because I preach it all the time. I want them working together on a regular basis because that gives a better product to the community. And they didn't have that before. So I think they appreciated the fact that I wanted them to work together. And that took a while. I would say like that took like probably a good year or so to get them all comfortable to be like, some maybe longer than others that they could do that. It's like building a team, you started at the, one position and then all of a sudden you got to be like, well, guys, we got a block, like I can't have recreation over here and public works over here and police down here. And we need to talk to one another. And seeing that transition of where we were in 19 to today is like that's one of the huge successes that's hard to point to because the only person that really sees that is me. Right. And the mayor who was a council person before he sees it. But the having that value, people need to know the value that they created. Like when I started here, nobody had a performance evaluation in 10 years. And I would look at it and I'm going to myself, okay, well, I would have department heads, hey, we need to do this with one person, this person needs to be suspended. Okay, show me their file. Nothing's in the file, right? And to me, it was like, I want the people that are doing a good job, they should at least hear once a year, you're doing a good job. And here it is in writing, the value of that to let people know and the value of the other side, right? If somebody's not doing what the job function is, they need to know, like, if you don't tell them, I need you to be doing this, they don't know. That's not fair to them to be able to, if they know and they're not doing it, that's another story. That's right. Like different actions, but people needed to be able to communicate. Um, what I always felt was, and Villanova taught me this as well. When you're communicating, you're building trust. I didn't walk in here day one and everybody trusted me, right? I had to communicate well and do it across multiple platforms. And over time, I built trust because people know if I said something, I was going to take it all the way through. If I said, we're going to do this, it was going to get done. If I said, I'm going to back you up, it was going to happen, right? They didn't have that prior to it. So you had to essentially it was like building a house from ground up, right? Everybody needed to be built back up and they were all great people. They just didn't know how to work with one another, right? They needed to be able to have that leader that said, we're working together, guys, and I'm demanding it. And then, oh, by the way, I'm going to be working with you to help make this better. And then, seeing that and being involved, that involvement, which takes time, is part of the success of where we've gotten to.
Such a good point that you have to really, if you come into a bad culture, it's not just about starting over. You have to rip down the studs of that bad culture, address it, and figure out how do you build something. And if you want collaboration, that starts with culture. Maybe let's speak to just real quick two last questions. The first one is this: if you came in, if you were giving insight, what's one practical thing someone who's coming into a place like Stafford, like was in 2019, if you had to do it all over again to rebuild that culture, to something that you could focus on in the first year of your time as a city manager, administrator in a new place that doesn't have a good culture, what do you think is one thing you would encourage a leader in your position to do to try to change that culture and try to foster that trajectory of health?
It's going back to what I just said, Seth. It's communicate. I mean, there were so many things that needed to be fixed when I walked in the door in 2019. Communicating with the public, communicating with the staff, communicating with the governing body. It was all about communication because there were job functions and paperwork and all those things that needed to be done. But if we didn't communicate with one another, that all the things that occurred after the fact would have never happened. So, and each person communicates in a different way. I think I learned that as a kid growing up. Some people, it's picking the phone up. Some people it's shooting an email to or text or, to me, it's all about respect, right? We, our custodians that clean the town hall at night, when I'm in here working at 8, 9 o'clock at night, to me that they're doing a job function. And not only that, but when we're out and we need overtime for different events we do, those are the people that are making that work, right? If I can't show respect to them, I should be able to show them the same respect to them that I show to our mayor. And to me, that's just being the person that you are, right? That's not about anything other that can be communicating. If I walk down, it doesn't hurt to be positive, right? So I'm positive in everything I do, but it also doesn't hurt to have manners. If somebody walks by you, how would you like, I know when I was in the sewer, when I was down in a aeration basin, taking a sewer sample, do you think I like doing that, Seth? Getting sprayed with what? Probably, I wasn't having a good day those 3 years that I did that. But and I learned this from a mentor I had at the ACUA, Rick Dovey. He showed every one of his staff respect in what he did. And he did that because it wasn't just like, well, I'm putting the face on because I'm the president of the ACUA. He did that because of the person that he is. And he knew that if he treated people with respect, it's about that leadership to show, well, if the leader can respect me for what I do and they can value me for what I do, I'm going to work for this person. Right. And to me, that's every person that we have. I don't need to do that. Right. I could just walk by the person and not do it, but showing that respect, it's who I am. But number two, it shows that person hey, I care about you. It's that extra little effort because number one, I do care about them. Right. When I started here, we didn't have, our safety committee hadn't met in 10 years. And we had our claims were 200%, which is outrageous, right? Over 200%. We've since gotten it down to about 10 to 20%. To me, that's not about the percentages. That's about making sure that when I come in today, I should be able to go home safely to my family. That goes for every one of my employees. I'm not doing my job unless I'm putting everything I can in place. And you also have to give yourself the ability to know that accidents happen. But my job is to keep all those folks safe. If I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my job. And to me, that's about they're family members to me. We function as a family to make this work and make it as well as we have become. We're just one point. I always point this out to all our staff. When I started here, the township had never had a bond rating increase ever. We've had 3 since I've been here. That doesn't happen because of just the mayor or the council or myself. That happens because of our CFO, our finance staff, but all the people that help provide the things to the budget, which include all the people that are under the department heads that come out and say, hey, the parks need to be updated or this field hasn't been updated in 50 years. If we don't have that information, all of it ties together. There's nothing in the silo. And that's why we all have to function as a team. So if I can't communicate and be respectful and work with each person like I would anybody else, I'm not getting as most out of the team as I possibly can.
So good. You mentioned it. You've been almost for a decade now. You've been an adjunct instructor at Villanova, working with the MPA program. As we close, give us what are you encouraged about with the younger generation, and how can we encourage more of our younger generation to strongly consider local gov as a career?
Yeah, I think to your last point, it's by doing things like this. That's why when you reached out, I said, hey, I think one of the first things we did to you was, hey, this is great. This is, we need to promote this. One of the things I think is, there needs to be a conscious effort, I think, whether it's at the high school level, at the college level, to let people know that this is a function. I think a lot of people think, just like I did back in the day, hey, I could be a doctor, I could be a lawyer, I could be an engineer or a project manager or a finance person or whatever it is. Nobody really thinks about this because there is a level of, working in the public. There's, people that make comments on Facebook, and you have to manage that life balance of, do you want that interaction? The pros and cons we talked about earlier. In the private sector, my budget isn't posted, right? You don't really, if you asked who the CEO is of any company, you or I probably aren't going to know that, right? But with these positions, you can go on and easily find here's the mayor and here's the BA and here's the CFO. That interaction I think is tough. I think that it starts with getting down to those specific people. And the way you do that is by going out and doing things like this to promote it and put in that thought process. Like I was back at 28 going, hey, I can do that. Like, hey, I think I would like doing that. And then that's where those people then start to prepare to then take on those roles. And then it's up to, the older guys like me to hopefully pass down that information to say, well, here's a template of how to do it. And, the nice part is you have a community that when you ask, you usually get back a ton of answers and a ton of different solutions to help you think for your community, which one works.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. I could talk to you for another hour. There's so many things to dive in on, but I think the cool thing about your story is you're leaning into your strengths, into your skills, into your past experiences. You're not just shutting those off because you're like, oh, I'm in a new field, new thing. You're using that. But you're also going, that's not enough. I've got to raise up and develop people with different skills so that all the work of local government can actually thrive and flourish. So they feel valued, they feel a part of the team, whether that's, the other department heads down to the person who's maybe lowest on the totem pole. They're all part of the mission and they're all worthy of being, seen and valued for that contribution. And then you're pouring into young people, encouraging them to be a part of that mission. So I love it. I think it's a great example. No wonder you're on that list of the 250 honorees. You're doing the work, not only of impact in that city, but of developing people. And I love that. I think that's the call, is to get us out of our silos into healthy cultures and into healthy collaboration. That's where real work really soars.
To me, that's only an asset to you too, Seth, because as you teach those folks, they become like captains in your army of what that mission is, because as they learn things, that allows you to do more. And then, like I said, if they end up leaving, to me, I never look negatively upon that. I might be disappointed that I'm losing the ability to do more, but at the same time, it's branching out for them to be able to do more in their respective community that they go to. And that's an asset, because there are unethical and professionals that don't do things in this manner. And to me, to teach people that way, as long as they take those values with them, then hopefully they apply them throughout their career and do more good things.
That's right. We just keep the tidal wave going.
Exactly.
Oh, Matthew, so many good things. Thanks for taking the time. Anything else as we close?
No, I think the point you made last is the one I'd like to just stress, is I think that development of people and finding people that are public service oriented is a great one. And I think there's multiple opportunities, not only for jobs, but educational opportunities to take things that you want to do in your career. The field is as open as you want it to be and as open as your mind can be. So if you take that into this, keep an open mind for that and for the development of public administration and, moving our communities forward into the future.
So good. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Vonder Hayden, what a great story, Matt. An incredible life journey and just incredible insights you've shared with us today. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, Seth. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
The stories we share here on the Halting Winter podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.